Hello, it's week 2, and we're talking about the JavaScript assignment. My name's Charles William Marshall. I go by Bill. You can reach me at cmarshall0050@kctcs.edu. And that's my cell phone. I post office hours. Don't abuse the cell phone, but if you need an appointment, you can call me during office hours, or better yet, email me at that address and we can set up a GoToMeeting where you and I can share screens. Don't forget that each week I need to have 15 minutes of your time with a GoToMeeting so that I can see how you're getting along and also see the work, because we don't have a server. The server you're using is your Windows 10 computer. Okay, it's for CIT 253. It's a 3-credit hour course. It's a data-driven web pages is our subject. Blackboard is the official assignment and where you turn everything in and so forth, but there's supplemental information available at https://www.cwmclass.com. Okay, your assignment for this week is going to have a problem statement of using only HTML and JavaScript. Create a web page where the user enters a 2-letter state code like MO for Missouri or KY for Kentucky. And then the page should tell the user if that state adjoins Iowa, or if the state's name and direction, and if it does adjoin Iowa, then the state's full name and the direction it is relative to Iowa. I picked Iowa because I have to have a state that's in the middle, so that I couldn't use anything on the borders of the United States. And Iowa's a nice state, and you may learn what states adjoin it doing this project. Okay, so when I enter WI in the page, it should return Wisconsin touches Iowa on the northeast side, and you can either have the IA or Iowa, your choice. If I enter CA, the page should return those 2 letters are not the code of any state that adjoins Iowa. Okay. I'm not sure how much JavaScript experience you have, so what I'm going to do is do effectively the same project, but for the state of Kentucky. I hope this will show you the concepts and prove to you that it's very doable. And if you're not familiar with JavaScript, get you tuned up so that you can do the rest of the work that will be required in the class. Okay. Using only HTML and JavaScript, create a web page where the user enters a 2-letter state code, and then the page, if the state adjoins Kentucky, displays the state name and direction relative to Kentucky. Else, that those 2 letters are not a code of any state that adjoins Kentucky. So, I typically, whenever I start one of these things, try to think about what information will I need. Well, I'm going to have to know what the states are that are around Kentucky, and I need all of their 2-letter abbreviation codes. I need their name, and I need the direction from Kentucky. And I see I spell from form, and I apologize for that. And all that came out of the problem statement. That's what I've got to have to answer the question. I've got to test against the 2 letters and then return the name and the direction. And so if I compile a little spreadsheet, it's going to look like this. Illinois, Missouri, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, and Indiana. There's 7 of them. And their name and their direction. Okay. In our case, we're going to use a Java class. A class is a type of function that instead of using a keyword function to initiate it, we use a keyword class, and the properties are assigned inside a constructor method. So in our case, we will need a state class to keep up with what we need to keep up about these states, and it's going to look like this, where we've got a function state, and we pass in abbreviation, the name and the direction, and use that code to set those properties. Okay. So if we had an array of classes of class state, we could keep up with all 7. And one thing to remember about arrays in JavaScript, they start with 0, which may or may not ruin your day. But to get an array, we declare a variable, and I'm going to call mine adjoin, and we set it equal to a square brace. Then we can populate it with instances of the state class, so I can say adjoin 0 equals new state and pass in Illinois, and North. And do the same for Missouri and Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana. Now, if you look, we've got 7, but we ended up at 6. Again, remember, in JavaScript, arrays start at 0. Okay, so we've got to figure out how to ask the user for a state code. And we can do that with this code, JavaScript, and that's just going to be a heading. And then we're going to have another heading that says, an H2, that says, enter 2-letter code of the state that may adjoin Kentucky, input type text, and press the tab. Well, the whole thing that gets the user a place to type it is right here, input type text. I've got to also put something on the page where I can, an element where I can put the answer. So I create this paragraph, give it the ID of result, and it's empty because we don't have an answer yet. Now, I've stored all my state codes as uppercase, upper K, upper Y, or T and N, and so forth. I have no reason to believe that the user is going to be nice enough to always type in uppercase. So I'm going to include this embedded code that says on the key up, every time the key comes up, I want this value to equal this value to uppercase. And then we're back to the rest of our statements. All right, I need to identify the element where I'm going to enter the student code so that I can reference it with JavaScript. And so I'm going to put in ID equals neighbor. And I need to check when the user changes neighbor element so that I can fire the code to go do whatever logic I'm going to have. And so I can say on change, check state. And so that's going to fire that function. All right. Well, before I do any of this, I'm going to need to define and initialize the variables. So I'm going to use find status. I'm going to declare a variable called fndstat, set it to 0. A variable called result, set it to 3, which is a nonsensical value, but I'm trying to have it where I want it. Then I'm going to make a loop to count through a loop counter variable I, and I'm going to initialize it to 0. I could have just had it variable I, but I have had better experience initializing them to some known value that won't get me in trouble. Okay, I've now got to fetch the text in the element neighbor. So when we fire check state, we're down here and we're going to say use the document, get the element by ID neighbor, and it's take its value and set it equal to a variable called ns, next state, or new state, or just ns. Then I'm going to find the length of the state code entered. So if I set I equal to, or j equal to ns length, I know how many characters they typed in. And so I know that if the state code is not 2 characters, it's no good. So I'm going to see if j, the length of ns, is greater than 0 and less than 1. And that's how you do an AND. And all right, so now I found out I have two good letters, or I have two letters, I don't know whether they're good or not. And so I'm going to loop through all the different ones to check to see if it's a match of one of the 7 that I have. So the loop starts here and ends down here. Okay, does the join code equal the state code entered? So I'm saying the option state is adjoin I, the place in the array we are, the code. And I'm saying the result is equal to this variable compared to, and do a location compare on NS. And NS was what they keyed in. All right, a locale compare gives you a 0 if they agree. So I'm checking if the result is equal. Notice the double equal signs, 0. Then I'm going to fall into this loop, or into this branch. And in that case, I'm going to say the document, get the element ID result, enter HTML. So I'm going to put something into the element result. And it's going to be adjoin I name plus touches Kentucky on the, note the spaces that I put in, the direction I got from my array, and then the rest of it I'm putting in the thing that says, oh, and if you want another one, press enter another state if you want to check more. I'm setting the fndstat to success. I found something, and then I'm breaking out of the loop, because if I found it, if the first of 7 was right, I don't need to worry about spending the time to step through the rest of them. All right, so this will loop me through from 0 to 6. If I get here and fndstat is still equal to 0, I never found anything. And so I'm going to fire the function badcode. They gave me a bad code. And badcode is simply going to say, okay, set the document result to those 2 letters, and it's just a constant text that says, hey, you didn't find anything. Okay, so what's the total source look like? Okay, it's document type HTML. In the head, and I always put in that I wrote it, just because I always do, and I advocate that you do it too. It's sometimes interesting to go back and find old code and realize how long ago it was you wrote it. Not maybe so much for you at this point, but as you go on, it will be amazing. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, and you get to write a lot of code over a lot of years, which I hope you all do. Okay, so here's where I'm developing the class and building function initiate the class state. And here's where I'm filling the array. And that gets us out of the head. I put it in the head, and it's debatable where to put it. And you can have religious discussions go on for decades. But I put this in the head because I only want it to fire once. It's not going to take long to run. As you get initiation, or as you're making calls to things that are going to take more and more time, it's good to put it very near the bottom of the body after you've gone through most of the HTML for the page. That way the user gets something on the screen to look at. But this is all going to run so fast that it really is kind of immaterial where I put it, but this is where I put it. Okay, and so the body looks like this, and so we've got the JavaScript and the heading where we discussed, and then we come down to the script, and we've talked about these scripts, so I'm not going to do them again. and then we end the body and we end the HTML. If you want to see it, you can go to https://www.cwmclass.com/source code/adjoinKY-state.html. Alright, we're back from the example. In conclusion, we'll have created a client-side solution, and all the codes contained in the HTML that you pull up. I didn't have any includes pulling in from any place else. We'll talk about the advantages of that doing yet, but this is a very simple JavaScript. It works whether if you saved it on your local hard drive or memory stick or whatever. It doesn't need to have a server to run. It is all browser based. Alright, so here we are on our sample page. I'm using Chrome, and so it's HTTPS, as we said, //://cwmclass dot, as you can see the screen there, and we've given it to you before. Alright, so that's what it looks like when you first bring it up. If you type Tennessee, and note that no matter what I do, it ends up being uppercase, and when I tab, it comes back and says Tennessee touches Kentucky on the south side. Enter another state if you want to check. And so I've never had to submit the page. It's all local. If I wanted to see the source code, I could come over here, come down to more tools, go to save the page, and I can save it locally there so that I can read it in whatever, Notepad Plus or whatever. Or I can come down to developer, and this lets me see the DOM structure and the source code all at the same time. So for JavaScript by itself, it's a really good thing, and you're going to come back to using Chrome as we start doing Ajax and so forth, because things will blow, and this is how you will find what blew up. Alright, so we've talked about how to create all these neat things, but how do we actually get it onto your computer? So you can use whatever editor you want. I'm going to use Notepad, and that was where I was here before. I come in, and you can't type this fast, but I can, and I key just what we've talked about in, and I can file and save as, and I want to be on the local disk. I want to be wherever you put Apache. I put mine under Apache 24. I want to be under HTT docs, and I want to save it as KentuckyAdjoin.html, and we'll save it. It's going to say yes, I want to replace because I was testing. Now, I'm also going to save it on my desktop just to demonstrate something. So if I save as again, and this time come over here to desktop and say that I want to save it. Now, we can get out of Notepad at this point. But if you wanted to go back and edit, you could certainly do that again. If I come here and click this, it's just on the web. It's just a file on the web page. On my desktop, and there it is. And if I type It works. Likewise, if I get it off the server, which is our Apache server that's running, and here it is down here, but you type the whole thing in. And so we get it not only from the desktop, but we're getting from the Apache server, and it all works the same. So again, we'll go back and have the conclusion of the demonstration, but with this, I hope you have enough to do your homework. Thank you. All right. So your problem statement is to use only HTML and JavaScript to create a web page where the user enters a 2-letter state code, and then the page tells the user if the state adjoins Iowa, and if it does, it tells the state's name and the direction it is relative to Iowa. So, for example, when I enter WI, the page should return Wisconsin touches Iowa on the northeast side. If I enter CA, the page should return those 2 letters are not the code of any state that adjoins Iowa. All right. So, week 2 JavaScript assignment. If you have questions, that's how to contact me. I wish you well, and thank you.